Hello there, my name is Theo Cope. There are currently in the world two different approaches using the term positive that seem to be very popular. One is positive psychology, which is in America. The other one is positive psychotherapy, which originated in Germany. And positive psychology, a few years ago, have created positive psychotherapy. Seligman consulted with lawyers and stated that the term cannot be trademarked. Hence, anyone can use them freely. I'm told they are too general to trademark. Okay, that's fair. Question I asked and that I'm presenting is, what happens if there are two forms of positive psychotherapy? Will that confuse people? And is there one approach that's different for particular reasons, or are these methods somehow comparable? So, positive psychotherapy, created by Nosrat Pesheshkian out of Germany in 1968, makes a statement which is necessarily positive in the sense of good and everything being great, but it's positive in a very different sense, which I will explain. A person who is incapable of grief, anxiety, depression, or occasional compulsions is not a perfect human being, but rather a person whose growth has been stunted with respect to these possibilities for unfoldment. Normally, people wouldn't think anxiety, grief, depression, or compulsion is something that's positive. However, I will demonstrate, and Pesheshkian demonstrates very clearly, it indeed is positive. Because positive comes from the word positum, which means real and given, and also from positif, meaning formally laid down. This is the Latin and French roots. Well, in the focus on what's real and given, we see people who have depression have the ability to feel deeply. They also can broaden that and feel about others as deeply as they feel about themselves. As well, phobia is a fear, ability to protect oneself from the outside world. Again, a person can broaden that to not be as fearful. Academic study problems, well, they can feel the overburden in the studies of pressure. The meaning of positive that's commonly used and used by Martin Seligman and groups in positive psychology was first used in 1916. So we see that positive psychotherapy from positum is using an older version, which is definitely valid. So what's given really may not be a focus of positive psychology. Because remember, positive psychology looks at the good elements. But not everybody has joy, happiness, resilience, gratitude, well-being, self-esteem, optimism, and self-efficacy. And then through steps of looking at therapy and positive psychology, these can be enhanced. The idea of positive psychotherapy came up in 1968 when it was published in 1977 as such. Before that, it was named differentiation analysis. It is an approach that looks at differentiating the content of the emotion. It has its roots in medical psychotherapy, psychiatry, and cross-cultural psychotherapy. As such, it's an integrative psychotherapy with elements from cognitive, behavioral, humanistic psychology, psychodynamic, as well as psychosomatic medicine and spirituality. Now, there are many approaches that are using an integrative approach. However, it's important to keep in mind that Pesheshkian created this in 1968 before there were such integrative approaches and when different schools were somewhat dominant. Positive psychotherapy has spread through Europe, also Africa, in China. There are 40 centers in the world. They're recognized by the World Council for Psychotherapy and the European Union for Psychotherapy. The United States and Canada has had literature, but it has not had the Positive Psychotherapy Center. And as such, it kind of created a vacuum that then was able to be filled by somebody saying, oh, we are creating positive psychotherapy. However, there's very clear indication of a priority of positive psychotherapy out of Germany. There were also publications in the libraries in the United States and in journals in the United States about positive psychotherapy. So the question becomes is, how was this not known by Martin Seligman? As stated, positive psychology out of the United States began in 1998 by Martin Seligman, and there's a wonderful story about its origination. However, it is a positive thought movement. And if we look at ideas in America about positive thought, this is something that goes back to the early 1900s. It's an academic study that looks at how it can study scientifically the positive aspects of being healthy, not just the negative aspects, because Seligman realized psychology has done enough of the negative. Positive psychology is adapted to coaching, well-being, and happiness studies, and it's becoming a scientific foundation. Okay. Positive psychotherapy out of Germany began as a psychotherapeutic approach. Positive psychology began as an academic study. Okay, so we see immediately that there is this distinction, and as such, that distinction becomes very important. Now, if we look at positive psychology, it has a research agenda, which is looking at something that Martin Seligman calls PERMA. There's a positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement. Interesting element about it is that positive psychotherapy focuses on relationships, meaning, achievement, and emotion. And so the question becomes, how do they contribute to each other, or what's the difference? Positive psychology therapy. Now, this is a term that comes from the book Positive Psychology, Theory, Research, and Applications by Heffron and Boniwell. This term may be applicable. Well, in 2006, Dr. Martin Seligman states that Taib Rashid and he created a version of what has been called positive psychotherapy. It has been used for, a quote, a set of techniques that are most effectively delivered with basic therapeutic essentials such as warmth, accurate empathy, basic trust, genuineness, and rapport. And as such, this therapeutic approach has 14 sessions and homework. It's used for depression, and it's based on positive psychology techniques. And remember, this is something that's being called positive psychotherapy. Of course, it's not related to positive psychotherapy out of Germany. The only relationship is the term positive, and again, it has a very different meaning, so it's very different. As such, positive psychology therapy looks at particular values, or knowledge and wisdom, with different dimensions granted to those, courage, humanity and love, justice, temperance, transcendence. What Seligman has done, to give great credit to his name, is he realized that there can be a scientific study of these good elements of life and these good elements leading to positive mental health and well-being. And he drew those concepts and values and virtues from the religious systems and began studying them systematically. If we look at the positive psychotherapy, a question can be raised, well, who used the term positive psychotherapy first, and does it really matter? I was notified of this issue because I had known Dr. Nosrat Pesheshkian, met him just very briefly before he died, and he sent me the information, exchange of letters between he and Martin Seligman about this issue, and I began reading and I wondered, well, okay, if Martin Seligman is making a claim in its 2006 article that Fordyce created a therapy in 1977, I wanted to know, is this valid? And it drew me to ascertain that perhaps it's not that valid. So, this is a quotation that comes from Martin Seligman's article. Indeed, therapies that attend explicitly to the positives of clients are few and far between. The first we know of was created by Fordyce, who developed and tested a happiness intervention consisting of 14 tactics. He found that students who received detailed instructions on how to do these were happier and showed fewer depressive symptoms than a control group. And if you notice on the slide, there are 4 terms that are highlighted: therapies, clients, intervention, and depressive symptoms. These are highlighted because what I wanted to determine is, in this original article by Fordham, actually there are 2 articles, did he really mention these? So I looked and realized, well, in these articles, he doesn't describe any form of therapy. He doesn't describe any clients. In fact, he's clear that he's using students as subjects. He doesn't describe any symptoms that his interventions relieved. In fact, an intervention is somebody talking to somebody. So in the loosest sense of the term, that is an intervention. And giving people questionnaires and leaving it up to themselves to do, that's an intervention. However, these terms were not used in the way that Martin Seligman's quotation leads one to believe. And again, the Fordyce published 2 articles, one in November 77 and the second in 1983. So you can check it out yourself. See if these are used in that way or not. The 2006 article by Martin Seligman that I demonstrated is problematic. It wasn't peer-reviewed. I learned that. Had it been peer-reviewed, I would have been really surprised that it would have been accepted. And I remember when I read it, I was very intrigued. I had tried to get information about it, and couldn't do so. Well, scientific priority is about respect and ethics within the field and the profession. Is this issue of priorities, scientific priorities, is it important? Well, if I were to ask you to think for a second, who do you attribute the theory of evolution to? Perhaps you said Charles Darwin. Probably not Alfred Wallace, unless you know something about evolution theory. But Darwin and Wallace published pretty much simultaneously, and Darwin was given that priority for particular reasons. And if you know something about psychology and psychological theory, and if I were to talk to you or to mention about an emotional complex or a complex theory, you might think of Carl Jung if you know it, but you probably wouldn't think of Max Wertheimer. Again, we see that in these issues, whoever publishes first, whoever has the greatest name, maybe even has something to do with prestige and clout, then they're the ones who are known about this. In this idea of scientific priorities, there's an article written in 2003 by Michael Strevens. He states that this priority rule is a system of rewards which accords all credit, so that all personal benefits that go along with the credit to the first research program to discover a particular fact or procedure, and none other programs pursuing the same goal. Well, if this is accurate, then we can see that clearly there is a priority for positive psychotherapy from Germany. Well, did Seligman and Rashid and the co-author also Parks, were they familiar with Pesheshkian's contribution? Seligman himself denies he had any knowledge of it. The other two, I talked to Taib Rashid, and he also didn't know about it. Well, I want to question this, and I looked at the facts, and these are the details that I found. In Germany, the term positive psychotherapy was first granted a German patent in 1998, and it expired in October 31st, 2006, and was renewed in July 2007. Well, an intriguing thing, Seligman, Rashid, and Parks' article asserting they have a new method called positive psychotherapy was published in November based on a talk that Seligman gave in August. So obviously he was using this term before, but in publication it was not until November 2006. Just a coincidence that it happened right after the patent expired, I'm sure of that. We have no way of proving it, but it's just speculation. As well, we see in the book called the Handbook of Positive Psychology, Charles Snyder, who gave a talk in 2000 at a World Conference of Positive Psychotherapy in Germany, knew about positive psychotherapy. There's no evidence we have that he talked to Seligman about it, and we do know that in another book called Handbook of Positive Psychology, 2 authors called Keyes and Lopez mentioned Pesheshkian's work. There's a misspelling. However, it does mention positive psychotherapy very clearly. As well, in a book called Positive Psychology in Practice, published in 2004, the book also mentions positive psychotherapy. So we see there are clear precedences within published literature in the field of positive psychology that there was an approach called positive psychotherapy. Had they searched, had Seligman, Parks, or Rashid searched through their own literature, they would have determined that this, in fact, existed. Question I asked, did Seligman and Rashid, by adopting this term and not mentioning Nosrat Pesheshkian, did they gain something by it? Did they enhance themselves? Strevens states, prestige is, it is generally agreed, allocated more or less in accordance with the priority rule. So I looked at it and thought, interesting dilemma. Prestige now denotes high standing achieved through success, influence, or wealth. So a person has a high prestige. However, the original meaning of it in the 1650s was trick, from prestige, deceit, imposture, illusion. or delusion or illusion? Was there a prestige issue about this priority rule and Seligman publishing something in 2006? I don't know. Pure speculation, nothing that anybody can ever go on. In letters exchanges back and forth, and this is something that somebody who's interested could find out, that Pesheshkian suggested to Seligman that in future, when using the term positive psychotherapy, will you please make reference to our approach? And in responding in email, Seligman said that seems a good solution. When we mention positive psychotherapy in writing, we will also note your approach. However, since 2010 and the other publications of Seligman that we have seen, this hasn't happened. In 2011, there was a book titled Flourish. Seligman mentions him and Rashid's Positive Psychotherapy, a treatment manual. He doesn't mention Nosrat Pesheshkian's Positive Psychotherapy. And a couple of other works also, it doesn't mention it. So that's right, it's an email. It's not something which is written in stone. It's a little bit questionable, perhaps. However, this Positive Psychotherapy treatment manual, which was intended to be published, hasn't been, and in part because of the foundation of it. There really isn't a reason scientifically for Martin Seligman to say, okay, we give credit for the term positive psychotherapy to Nosrat Pesheshkian, in part because they do come from different methods and they are different approaches. However, is there something about respect? Is there something about a moral or reason to do this? Strevens seems to think in his article that it's a moral obligation. However, that's each individual's choice. However, out of every bad, there is something that could be made that's good. There was a conference in Turkey in 2014 where there was a good rapprochement between Tayyib Rashid in positive psychology and the field, many people in positive psychotherapy, and determined that there needs to be a better, healthier way forward, so that way both parties can learn and generate benefits for people, because both approaches seek to help people live better lives. Both approaches use the term positive, and it is indeed something that we would like to have good, healthy lives and realize at times we don't. I thank you very much.